Hello, we are back again live. Today it is February 23rd, 2023. It is our Afrocentric exploration of the Holy Writing. And of course, this is the chapter that we will be looking at. It is chapter 9. I was thinking of doing chapter 9 and 10 together, but it seems like chapter 9 itself has a lot of material, and it is really a standalone chapter that we need to unpack and make sure that everything is at least what we can manage to get out of it will make sense. So without further ado, we are going to do that. It is a chapter about after the deluge. Now Noah and his sons and the wives of his sons, as well as his wife, are off that, and it is a reorganization of humanity once more. And there is a couple of things that happen, and those are very important to unpack. One of them is the fact that Noah was blessed with his sons. And it is interesting to see the similarity between the blessing that was placed upon Noah and his sons and the blessing or the command that was given to Adam when civilization or humanity was jump started. Now, if you are a secular person, you will really find this to be the part where, again, it is said that three people, four male. This actually gets a little bit better. Four male and female were able to produce 8 billion people moving forward. And as a secular person, that does not make sense because it's just too much interbreeding and the possibility of having malformations and things of that nature to carry out a civilization or a community or a country that will be that vast out of intermarriage or interbreeding is just not feasible. It's not, doesn't make sense. And of course, if you are someone who who is religious, this is a passage where you understand that the episode, was one, they are forbidden to consume blood. This is, one of the verses usually used by certain religious organization to justify the fact that consuming blood or transfusion is a sin. And of course, there are scientific explanation and benefits for not consuming blood because there are no two blood types that are the same. There is always something that is different that is introduced into your body. And this one, for better or worse, that was rightly spotted by this organization and making sure that people abide by that. It has its pros, it has its cons, and given the rate of brutality and accident, violent accident, loss of blood and thing, transfusion has had its benefit for many, many years. And the question is, would that be better if that was not available? And of course, I'm not an expert to talk on that, but that's at least where it comes from. This is a key verse that really supports the uh, the forbiddance to consume blood, right? Now, the other thing for religious people, it will be the curse of Ham. Ham is one of the sons of Noah that went on, and because his father consumed too much alcohol, was drunk, and was naked, he was able to see the nakedness of his father, and instead of covering his father, he went on to talk about it to his other brothers, who came backward and covered their brother. And as a result, Noah cursed Ham against Shem and Japheth, and he predicted that the generations or the seed of Ham will be slave to Japheth and it's Japheth and Shem. Now, that has been used also secularly to justify the situation in which we, people of African descent, find ourselves in, going through slavery, and slavery that has benefited people of other races who are considered. There is a map online that shows an ancient map of where Ham was, which is part of North Africa and Africa, and then Shem was that part of the Middle East and Asia, as and Japhet was in the north where the Europeans are, right? And you can see that slavery was mainly perpetrated by the um, I'll say the Muslim nation, as well as the Catholic, the Christians who came to Africa and made that a trade. Were there other Africans who were involved? That the answer is yes, because just like in any tyranny, it doesn't happen unless there are people inside who participate in the lie and making that possible. Now, that is the justification, or that is the place where, some people really feel that it is unfair and thing, but that's the situation. It's another explanation. There are other things that I was able to look at and look at differently and understand differently. And I will say, like, in a Afrocentric way, you can take the that incident where Ham is cursed for seeing the nakedness of his father and mocking pretty much the father, right? And this is something that happens a lot. You have to consider that the father is the culture. Like, culture represent the father. It is rigid, and sometimes it goes through that a period of looking really shallow, stupid, not modern enough, and the what we do naturally is to dismiss it and find it as something that has no value. And you will hear this amongst many people, like, okay, we are in the 21st century. Those kind of things about kings and this tradition and that tradition, those we don't apply them anymore. And I think it's the wrong way to look at these things, because other nations have kept their monarchy one way or another. You can see what is happening in Great Britain. The Queen, who just died a few months back, she has been there as the head of state of more than 52 nations worldwide. And that institution still exists. Compare that to how the French dealt with their monarchy. They kind of brushed it aside violently, and that just fell apart. And you can see that, it's not that it's a weak nation, but there is a certain dominance of the Anglo-Saxon world compared to the French world, right? Even African colonies that were colonized by French are problematic compared to colonies that were occupied by the British. They seem to be doing much better than those. I'm not saying that because the British respected their culture, that meant it was more successful. But you can see a correlation that in the way the nation carries itself. And what has been done in Africa primarily is to convince us that whatever sorts of, I will not even call it spirituality, which it is, or whatever sorts of cultural manifestation that did not intuit so easily was considered as juju, was considered as voodoo, it was considered as witchcraft, it was considered as something not to touch in replacement of what was brought from outside. It was forced upon us with the papal inquisition, where it's not like people converted to such or such religion willingly. They were forced to do that. Those who resisted were killed at the order of the Pope. And I believe it was not any different from what happened. Actually, I should not say it was not any different, because the Muslim cultures, some of them are very, very similar to what happens, what we consider as a way of being as Africans, right? But there was a sort of coercion that was applied to our ancestors to go to worship the gods that their forefathers never knew, right? And as we came, as new generations, that memory was erased. And we really are the only people in the world that who do not know where we come from, who do not understand the values that were erased and buried in a long time. But that is none of our fault. What gets really um, weird is when these realities or these cultures try to emerge, or and we dismiss them as nonsense. It is the equivalent of, laughing at the it weaknesses, what laughing at the nakedness of our spirituality. And no wonder why now all these Bibles, and I say this one was commissioned by King James. I haven't shown it again. All the pictures are full of white people. Maybe a few sprinkle of other races, but that was really the predominant narrative that conquered the world to a point where, you know, we lost what was ours. And the funny thing is that they find value in our artifacts, because all of them now were taken in Europe, they were taken in other parts of the world, while at the same time mocking them to be witchcraft, voodoo, juju, and nonsensical, which is a contradiction that should alarm us. But I think what we do now, especially our generation, we look at our traditions, we look at our spirituality, ancient African spirituality, as something that is weak, and we do that at our own peril. The results will not be any different than what happened to Ham. That is I think, a way to look at this and to look at the elders, because there is this thing in Africa that has never disappeared, right? And I think it's in other part of the world where people of African descent live, that veneration for the elders, where it is not your father, it is not your mother, but as long as they are older than you, you submit, and you have a certain kind of respect. Other parents, other kids' parents are allowed to spank your own kid, and there is no police involvement and that kind of thing. I'm not advocating to spank kids, but I'm saying that they are able to discipline your kids, and it is okay, because that parent is not parent just for you, it is parent for everybody, any child that is in the community. Now, we do harm that by considering it as archaic and something to do away. And that leaves us really empty because we don't have the culture, the foundation that supports us. History has shown that you may lose your land, you may lose everything that you have, but if you keep your culture, your language, your values, there is a big chance that you will emerge from it very successfully. Case in point, I'll say the Indians with Hinduism, who that celebrates many gods and goddesses. The British tried. Of course, they were able to split it into two with Pakistan and India. But India today, as it is, has overtaken the British as the fifth largest economy in the world. How did that happen? Where at a point the British had everything in that country, but they were able to recoup it because their culture was preserved. And the reason why we keep losing our lands, part of our spirituality, is because we have neglected to update those cultures instead of looking down upon them, right? That is one thing that we as African or people of African descent can look closely and come back to that and see these cultures differently. Try to understand them. Give them a chance. Give them the benefit of the doubt. Another point that I thought was very interesting is on, we already spoke about the consumption of blood, but also this is where it is introduced for them to eat meat, presuming that men or human were originally designed to be, I would say, um, non meatitarian, I'll say, or vegetarian. But is that the case? There is a good reason to believe that it was not carnivorous for a long period of time. And unfortunately, even our herbs are being contaminated so that, we crave for what is not normal. Because it is not, I will say this, and I'm not an expert on this again, it is not useful to consume DNA material that is very close to you and that is external. And that really is in line with the consumption of blood that is spoken about in this verse. Because God says, but flesh, you should not get the blood, the life that is in it. The life is the information that is in the person. The information is, being communicated through the body, through the blood. The blood is the carrier of life or that information. And as such, if you consume something that is closer to you, then it's really not optimum for your development. I'm not really advocating for being vegetarian or vegan, all that sort of thing, but I see some wisdom in it. And people who have tried it have said that things have changed. But the trap is that the plant-based are really not coming from the plants, from the plantations, I will say, but it's coming from the plants. And that is in itself, I believe, is more dangerous than consuming the meat that people are trying to avoid, as long as that meat still meat, not something cooked up in a lab and being provided to people. We don't know what is there. It's new, but that is really something that stood up for me there. The other thing is like the God says that for in the image of God made he man. God made man in the image of God, and for that reason, he was not allowed to consume the blood of man and the animal at that point. Now, animals are being introduced as a, a menu to humanity, and we took it. The other space where I saw that stood out was in verse 11. It talks about a covenant that was established um, with Noah and his son, and actually with all humanity, that all flesh be cut off. And God said that he will never destroy the earth with a flood anymore. And he created a rainbow that will remind him of that covenant with humanity that he should not destroy. Now, looking back to that, there is some discovery in Turkey, and this is in Göbekli Tepe, and it shows really some fascinating events. There's a serpent that has its head that protrudes, and the serpent usually is depicted as those asteroids coming from the earth. And it was as if, and the Göbekli Tepe was actually covered intentionally. It was not as if it was hit or destroyed by the comet, but it was a sort of warning that this event that created, that ended the ice age, could come again. And we only had to look at the stars and really read, know astronomy or astrology, depending on where you're tilting, to understand how we can count our days so that this event does not come again. Now, this is where I get my suspicion about the motives and the intent for this one God who not long ago didn't want humanity to be like them and tried to and removed them from the Garden of Eden, and now all of a sudden, if the intent was to destroy humanity, which was tried, and some were spared, this warning that the earth will not be destroyed in that manner with flood anymore, is it something that we should take his word for? Or is it something that we should really see as a coded message from our ancestors, from those who wanted to preserve humanity, to say that through these discoveries in Göbekli Tepe, those wanted to warn us that this will happen, because these civilizations have lived for quite a long time and were able to observe more cycles of the solar system happen. Whereas, as you remember in chapter 7, 8, and 9, there was a spot where it says that God has reduced the number of years for humanity. Now it is at 120. This keeps going down. And it is probably, and it's not probably, I believe that it is useful for us, people of African descent and African, to have a culture of astronomy, a culture of archaeology that will inform us not only about our past, but the past of the universe, but also our future, because our future is in the stars. But we don't know how to read any of that. And any African genius or any person of African descent, a genius that is working in this big astronomical project, they do so on behalf of other nations. None of this is done on behalf of our people. Because why? Because we don't have the institutions that are sovereign, that will be able to undertake these kind of things. I was watching something from president was saying that we are going to ask the American, the Chinese up there, what do they see up there? We too we should go there. Uh, uh, these kind of things in a nonchalant way, and it's crazy. But that's where we are. That's what I see in these scriptures. That's what um, we can apply on an Afrocentric way of looking at things and make sure that we change the course of our future, the humanity, our people, but also we can rediscover um, the past. Because without the information on that past, without that cultural grounding, we will find ourselves in harm's way. We'll find ourselves cursed. Now, I want to keep that notion of a core curse because there is something interesting that I found after that as to the descendants of Ham, what they became, and why we should not feel necessarily belittled when people say that we are slave. The black race was meant to be slave. This is perpetrated by a certain, you know, group of people. And this was what was believed to be true, was taught to other nations, that we were not created in the image of God. We were subhuman. I even learned that, you know, there are the Khoisan in South Africa. British people used to go hunt them because they knew they considered them as animals. But, you know, over time, we know more because all that information is within us. We know we are greater than this, but we have to find a way there. I've tried to keep this at a maximum of half an hour, and we are on time. So I'll leave it there. Tomorrow, we have the webinar on wealth gap, racial wealth gap. The link is below. Please register. Let's share some knowledge and explore this wealth gap and find solutions to that. Until then, I'll see you on Friday. Bye.